Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was around 1:15 a.m. when Kyle noticed the figure on the side of the road. He was driving west through the back roads of Pennsylvania, a long stretch of wooded nothing between two small towns. He was a night owl and often preferred driving when the highways were empty, the air cooler, and the silence deeper. His playlist was low in the background, humming with old acoustic guitar songs when his headlights swept over something or someone just beyond the tree line. At first he thought it was a deer, but as the beams locked in, he realized it was a person. A man, standing death still on the side of the road, holding one arm out with his thumb up. Kyle slowed instinctively. The man was tall, gaunt even, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. His face was pale under the flickering shadows of the trees, and he wasn't moving much, just standing there with his thumb held out like a statue. Kyle's first reaction was to drive past, but something about the man's expression, or lack of one, froze him. He couldn't see his eyes clearly, but it felt like they were locked onto him even through the windshield. Against his better judgment, Kyle pulled over. The hitchhiker didn't move at first. Then, after a long, uncomfortable pause, he walked toward the passenger side. His footsteps were slow, deliberate. Kyle rolled down the window halfway. "Where you headed?" Kyle asked. The man's voice was gravel and whispered. "Just up the road." Kyle hesitated. There was no house, gas station, or sign of civilization, just up the road. Only miles of twisting tree-lined blacktop. But before he could second guess, the man opened the door and climbed in. He didn't smell. He didn't talk. He just stared ahead, hands on his knees. Kyle tried to break the silence. "Rough night, huh?" No answer. "You from around here?" Nothing. Kyle gave up and kept driving. A few minutes passed, and the air in the car started to feel heavy. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like the man beside him was radiating something unnatural. Not just body heat, colder. He glanced sideways. The man's lips were moving slightly, but no sound came out. Whispering, maybe? Muttering, Kyle leaned in just a little. The man turned and looked at him. Finally, his eyes were wrong. They were deep set, far too dark, and they didn't reflect the light. Just two black pits. Kyle jerked the wheel slightly, startled, but the man turned back toward the windshield like nothing happened. What's your name?" Kyle asked cautiously. The man didn't speak. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched too far, too slow, like someone trying to remember how to smile but getting it all wrong. Kyle's stomach dropped. He put his foot on the gas a little harder. Was just wanting this ride to be over. After what felt like 20 minutes, Kyle saw the glow of a roadside diner ahead. One he didn't remember seeing before. The hitchhiker suddenly spoke, his voice a raspy echo. "Right here." "You sure?" Kyle asked, scanning the dark parking lot. The diner looked abandoned, no cars, no lights inside, just the flicker of a neon sign that buzzed erratically. The man was already opening the door. He stepped out slowly, turned back to the car, and leaned in through the open window. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said. Then he walked toward the diner, vanishing into the dark. Kyle didn't wait. He floored it. He drove straight to the next town, pulled into a 24-hour gas station, and got out, shaking. The clerk inside told him there was no diner back there. Nothing for 30 miles in either direction. Kyle left the state the next morning. He never drives at night anymore, and he never picks up hitchhikers because sometimes when he's alone on a quiet road, he still sees that man, still hears that whisper in his head. You shouldn't have stopped.
Story number 2.
On a cold October night in 1997, a 26-year-old truck driver named Alan was making a routine run through the desolate stretches of Highway 93 in Nevada, one of the loneliest roads in America. It was just past 2 a.m., and the desert around him was silent, except for the low hum of the engine and the occasional gust of wind rattling against the cab. He'd been driving for hours and was running on cheap coffee and static-filled country radio when he saw her. A figure, barely lit by the high beams, stood just off the shoulder. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, wearing a long white dress that shimmered slightly in the headlights. Her dark hair hung over her face, and one arm was outstretched, thumb raised. It was strange. No broken-down car, no bag, nothing. Alan passed her before he could really register what he was seeing, and something told him to just keep going. but guilt gnawed at him. What if she really needed help? He slowed the truck, cursing himself, and reversed about 100 yards back. She was still standing there, exactly as she had been, unmoving. When he stopped and rolled down the window, the cold hit him like a slap. "Need a ride?" he asked. The woman didn't speak. She simply opened the passenger door and climbed in, her movements oddly smooth, like she wasn't really touching the floor. She didn't look at him. Her face remained hidden behind her hair. "Where you headed?" he asked, uneasy. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly turned her head and pointed straight ahead. Alan chuckled nervously, trying to shake off the growing tightness in his chest. They drove in silence for nearly 15 minutes. Every time he glanced at her, she hadn't moved, still staring straight ahead, face obscured. His radio crackled violently. No music, just bursts of static, and the headlights flickered once, twice, then steadied. His palms were sweating. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice sounding too loud in the thick silence. The woman finally turned to face him fully. Her hair parted just enough for him to see her face. Her eyes were gone, not missing, just black, deep voids like holes drilled into her skull. Her mouth hung slightly open, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like a whisper coming from far away. "You should not have stopped." Alan nearly slammed the brakes, but before he could react, the cab filled with an unbearable cold. The lights went out completely. The truck roared like it had been torn in half, and in the blackness he felt something reach across from the passenger seat and grab his arm. Ice cold, bone-thin fingers. Then nothing. Alan came to just as the sun was rising. He was alone in the cab, parked on the side of the road. The truck was dead, no power at all. Hours had passed, and no memory of what happened after that moment remained. He stumbled out into the rising desert heat, dazed. Later, after he was towed to the nearest town, the mechanic found deep scratches gouged into the inside of the passenger door, like fingernails trying to claw their way out. Years later, Alan refused to drive at night. He told the story only once, at a bar in Flagstaff, trembling as he spoke. A local overheard and quietly said that there had been sightings, reports going back decades, of a woman in white hitchhiking along that same stretch of highway, always alone, always silent. And every time someone picked her up, they were never the same again. Some say she was a bride killed on her wedding night. Some say she was thrown from a passing car in the desert and left to die. Whatever the truth is, drivers still report seeing her. Some keep driving, others stop, but only once.
Story number 3.
It was just past midnight when Mark decided to take the long way home after a late shift. The highway was empty, except for the occasional flicker of distant headlights, cutting through the dense fog settling over the trees. He wasn't usually one to pick up hitchhikers, especially at night, but something about the silhouette standing by the side of the road caught his eye. A young woman, drenched and shivering, her clothes torn and smeared with mud. She looked desperate. Against his better judgment, Mark slowed and pulled over. The woman climbed in without a word, her eyes fixed ahead, unblinking. Her silence was unsettling, but Mark chalked it up to trauma or shock. He tried to make small talk, but she only gave monosyllabic answers, her gaze vacant yet intense. As they drove deeper into the woods, the GPS suddenly lost signal. The radio sputtered and went dead. Mark's phone showed no bars. The woman still said nothing. A cold chill crept up his spine. Something about her didn't feel right. Out of nowhere, she reached out and grabbed his hand, her skin ice cold, clammy. Her fingers dug into his palm, holding tight. He tried to pull away, but the grip was unnerving, almost unnatural. Then she whispered in a voice that sounded like a dozen others layered together, "Don't look behind you." Mark's heart hammered. Curiosity and fear warred within him, but the warning echoed in his mind. The road behind was empty, just black nothingness, save for a shadow that seemed to flicker in the corner of his eye. He forced himself to keep his eyes on the road. Minutes stretched like hours. The woman suddenly turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes were hollow pits, deep and black, absorbing the light. She smiled, a twisted, impossible smile that tore at the corners of her mouth like a wound. Without warning, the car's lights flickered and died. The engine sputtered, then went silent. Mark's breath caught. The woman leaned in close, her cold breath brushing his cheek as she whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped." In the darkness, Mark fumbled for his phone. When he turned it on, the screen displayed dozens of missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, all labeled "Help Me." Panic clawed at his throat. The woman's grip tightened and his vision blurred. Suddenly, the car jerked violently. Mark was thrown forward as the vehicle lurched off the road, skidding into the trees. He hit the windshield hard. When he came to, the woman was gone. No sign she'd ever been there. No muddy footprints, no wet clothes draped over the seat. Only the echo of her voice lingered in the night air, and the chilling realization that the road ahead led to nowhere but deeper darkness. Mark never spoke of that night again, but sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the night feels too still, he hears a whisper in the wind, "Don't look behind you."
Story number 4.
It was just past midnight when Mark decided to take the long way home. He had been working late at the diner on the edge of town and was exhausted. The roads were nearly empty, the kind of quiet that presses in too close, like the world itself was holding its breath. His old sedan's headlights barely cut through the thick fog rolling off the nearby fields. As he drove, he saw her standing by the roadside, thin, pale, wearing a long white dress that fluttered unnaturally in the still air. She looked soaked, but the rain hadn't touched that part of the highway. Mark hesitated. Usually, he'd ignore hitchhikers, especially at night, but something about her made him slow down. Her eyes, wide and dark, locked on his with an intensity that made his skin crawl, yet he found himself opening the door. "Thanks," she whispered, sliding in without a word, her voice barely audible. Mark glanced over. Her face was almost too perfect, like porcelain, but her smile was too wide, too sharp at the edges. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling as he started driving again. For miles, she didn't say a word. The silence was suffocating. Then, just as Mark reached to turn on the radio, she spoke, her voice chilling. "Do you like stories?" He nodded, forcing a smile. "Sure." She began telling him about a man who picked up a girl hitchhiking on a foggy night, much like this one, only she never made it home. The man woke up the next morning to find her gone, and on his dashboard was a message written in blood. "You shouldn't have stopped." Mark's heart pounded. He glanced in the rearview mirror. She was grinning now, teeth unnaturally sharp and glistening under the dashboard light. The car suddenly felt colder. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt, but when he turned, the seat was empty. Panicking, Mark looked around, but the road was empty, just fog and silence. Then his eyes caught it. Written on the fogged-up window beside him was a message scratched deep enough to fog the glass further. "Next time, don't stop." The engine died, the radio burst into static, and the world outside the car seemed to close in, darker than before. Mark sat frozen, trapped in the night, with the echo of footsteps just outside the door, too slow, too deliberate.